Admiral Zarnek dismissed the panicking junior officers with a sharp gesture of his primary limb. "Clear the command deck of all non-essential personnel," he ordered, his voice deliberately steady despite the cold dread pooling in his thoracic cavity. The remaining senior staff stood in rigid formation, their varied anatomies all displaying the universal signs of fear. "Magnify the human vessel," Zarnek commanded. The holographic display expanded, revealing the HFY Thunderchild in terrifying detail. Unlike the crude, utilitarian ships humans had fielded during the First Contact War, this vessel possessed an elegant predatory silhouette. Its hull gleamed with a material unknown to conclave metallurgists, absorbing scanner beams rather than reflecting them. Science Officer Telvorin's analysis confirmed his worst fears. "The vessel's power signature exceeds our battle cruisers by a factor of 3, she reported, tendrils twisting nervously around her data tablet. "And those protrusions along the ventral hull, they appear to be weapons systems unlike anything in our database." The station's tactical officer, a grizzled veteran of the Helios campaign, magnified a section of the hull where strange angular script was visible. "That's not standard human lettering," he noted. "It resembles the quantum encryption patterns of the Vex hegemony." A chilling realization swept through the command deck. "The Vex were annihilated 12 cycles ago," Zarnek said slowly. "Their home system quarantined after their alleged bioweapon deployment." "Alleged," repeated Telvorin meaningfully. "Just as humans were allegedly developing prohibited weapons technology." The implication hung in the recycled air like a poisonous gas. How many of the Conclave's containment actions had been based on actual threats, and how many on fabricated intelligence designed to neutralize potential rivals? The communications array chimed again. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Admiral," the communications officer reported, his exoskeleton clicking nervously. "Not just to us. They're transmitting to every outpost and civilian settlement within 3 light years." "Block the transmission," Zarnek ordered. I can't stir. They're using our own communication protocols, but with an encryption algorithm that's adapting faster than our systems can counter." On screens throughout the station, the face of a human female appeared. Her dark eyes held none of the fear that should have been present in a species facing its technological superiors. Instead, they burned with something far more dangerous: certainty. "I am Lieutenant Commander Alexis Chen of the Earth Defense Force vessel Thunderchild," she began, her voice translated perfectly into 17 Conclave dialects. "For 20 years, the Conclave has maintained that Earth was quarantined to protect the galaxy from human aggression. Today, we return to correct the record." The screen split to show archival footage that made Admiral Zarnek's primary heart stutter. It showed Conclave mining vessels stripping resources from Earth's outer planets. More damning were the timestamps. Operations had begun 3 standard years before the alleged human weapons violations that had justified the quarantine. "We come seeking truth, not vengeance," continued Commander Chen, though the steel in her voice suggested both were on the table. "Captain Shaw requests the presence of Sector Command representatives aboard the Thunderchild within 6 hours to begin diplomatic discussions." The transmission ended, leaving the command deck in stunned silence. Admiral Zarnek gazed at the massive human warship through the observation viewport, its presence seeming to distort the very space around it like a gravitational anomaly. "Orders, Admiral," prompted his second-in-command. Zarnek straightened his ceremonial carapace. The humans had outmaneuvered them before firing a single shot. Their strategic use of information as a weapon was more devastating than any kinetic bombardment. "Prepare my shuttle," he said finally, "and transmit everything we've seen to High Command." As his officers rushed to comply, Zarnek added quietly, "The battlefield has indeed begun to quake. But I fear this is merely the first tremor of a galactic earthquake." Lieutenant Commander Chen traced her fingers over the tactical display as Captain Shaw entered the bridge. The holographic projection showed the Conclave delegation's approach vector. A small shuttle flanked by 2 ceremonial escort vessels, that posed no threat to the Thunderchild. They're sending Admiral Zarnik himself, Chen noted, bringing up the alien's personnel file. Decorated veteran, known for his moderate stance on interspecies relations before the quarantine. Shaw nodded, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the tactical display, and conveniently one of the few high-ranking officers who wasn't directly implicated in our evidence cache. The bridge fell silent as the implications settled over the crew. For 20 years, humanity had been patient, gathering intelligence through quantum entanglement probes disguised as space debris. The Conclave never realized that their sensor sweeps triggered microscopic data transmissions back to Earth's hidden research facilities. Engineering reports the gravitational matrix is stable, announced Lieutenant Park from the operations console. We can maintain the imposing stance indefinitely. Shaw smiled slightly. The Thunderchild's current position, holding perfectly still without station-keeping thrusters, was impossible by Conclave understanding of physics. The ship's revolutionary gravitational anchoring system created the illusion of effortless power, like a predator conserving energy before a strike. "Very good," Shaw replied. "Commander Chen, join me in welcoming our guests. Commander Rodriguez, you have the bridge." As they walked toward the diplomatic reception bay, Chen's hand instinctively checked the neural interface at her temple, a small silver disc connecting her to the ship's tactical systems. It was another innovation born of necessity during the long isolation. Earth couldn't match the Conclave's numbers, so they'd developed technology to reduce reaction times instead. "Are you ready for this, Alexis?" Shaw asked quietly as they entered the elevator. The use of her first name marked the shift from official to personal, a rare occurrence for the typically formal captain. Chen considered the question. 20 years ago, she had watched from a refugee camp as the Singapore arcology burned, her parents somewhere in the inferno. She had been 13, old enough to understand what was happening, but too young to do anything but survive. Now she would face the species responsible. "I've rehearsed this moment for most of my life, sir," she answered honestly, "though I always imagined more weapons would be involved." Shaw's laugh was brief but genuine. "There are many kinds of weapons, Commander. Today, truth may prove more devastating than any kinetic strike." The elevator doors opened to reveal the reception area, transformed from its usual utilitarian appearance into a space designed specifically to unsettle the Conclave representatives. The environmental settings were calibrated to human comfort, temperature and gravity slightly higher than Conclave standard. Lighting spectrum shifted toward Earth normal. Small discomforts that would subtly reinforce the power dynamic. Most striking was the display along one wall, a chronological timeline of Earth's major technological achievements since the quarantine. Innovations that should have been impossible without access to the Galactic Community Scientific Exchange. "The delegation has docked," announced the ship's eye in its carefully calibrated gender-neutral voice. "Atmospheric compatibility confirmed. Security scans detect no weapons beyond the ceremonial items mentioned in their manifest." Chen squared her shoulders as the airlock cycled. "One question, Captain. The tertiary evidence files, the ones implicating half the Conclave High Command in resource theft. Are we really planning to release those regardless of how these negotiations proceed?" Shaw's expression remained neutral, but his eyes hardened. "That decision will depend entirely on what happens in the next hour, Commander. Sometimes the threat of a weapon is more effective than its use." The airlock hissed open, revealing Admiral Zarnik and his entourage. The Admiral's compound eyes swept the reception area, lingering on the timeline display with visible shock before settling on the two human officers. "Captain Shaw, Lieutenant Commander Chen," he greeted them, his translator rendering his clicking speech into smooth English. "It seems humanity has been quite productive during our absence from galactic affairs." "Admiral," Shaw replied with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You have no idea." The Thunderchild drifted silently through the debris field of the contested mining colony, its adaptive hull plating absorbing ambient radiation, to render it nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. Captain Shaw stood at the command platform, watching as 3 conclave battle cruisers moved into formation 2,000 kilometers off their port bow. "They've taken the bait," Lieutenant Cato announced from tactical. "Sensor suites indicate they're powering up tractor arrays." Shaw nodded, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the tactical display. "Time to show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. Execute Maneuver Chen Alpha 7. Throughout the massive vessel, crew members braced themselves as inertial dampeners hummed to maximum capacity. The Thunderchild suddenly vented superheated plasma from its port nacelles in a spectacular display of apparent system failure. Emergency beacons activated automatically, broadcasting distress signals on standard conclave frequencies. "Their lead vessel is breaking formation," Chen reported, her fingers dancing across the neural interface controls. "Exactly as anticipated. The commander is young, eager to claim the prize of a crippled human warship." Shaw's expression remained neutral, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, initiate countermeasures the moment they engage tractor beams." Aboard the lead conclave vessel, Commander Turvok watched with mandibles twitching in excitement as his ship closed on the damaged human vessel. "Prepare boarding teams," he ordered. "High Command will reward us handsomely for capturing this technology intact." His tactical officer's carapace shuddered in warning. "Commander, the human vessel's power signature is fluctuating irregularly." "This could be a trap." "Nonsense," Turvok interrupted. "Their systems are failing. Engage tractor beams and bring them into the docking bay." The moment the invisible energy fields of the tractor beams touched the Thunderchild's hull, the human vessel's apparent damage vanished. The vented plasma, still surrounding the ship in a diffuse cloud, suddenly compressed and superheated as hidden field generators activated. "Ionized plasma shell established," reported Lieutenant Cato. "Their sensors are effectively blind." Shaw nodded. "Execute." The Thunderchild performed a maneuver that defied conventional physics, accelerating at 48 gravities by briefly phasing its mass into an adjacent dimension. Technology reverse-engineered from the crashed conclave enforcement vessel. Inside the ship, the crew experienced nothing more than moderate pressure as advanced inertial dampeners compensated. The conclave vessels, blind within the plasma cloud, and confused by contradictory sensor readings, reacted too slowly. The Thunderchild emerged from the superheated cloud directly behind the formation, its weapons systems targeting with surgical precision. "Disable their propulsion and communication arrays only," Shaw ordered. "Minimum casualties." Concentrated pulses of energy struck each conclave vessel exactly where their shields were weakest, another advantage of 20 years studying conclave technology. Within moments, all 3 battle cruisers were drifting, their main systems offline. "Open a channel to the lead vessel," Shaw commanded, straightening his uniform. When the connection was established, he faced the stunned conclave commander with calm dignity. "Commander Turvok, your vessels have been disabled, not destroyed. Your life support remains functional, and we are deploying emergency beacons to ensure your retrieval." Shaw's voice was measured, without a trace of gloating. "You will deliver a message to your High Command. Humanity did not break the quarantine to seek revenge, but justice." The Thunderchild released a series of small satellites around the disabled vessels, communication buoys loaded with carefully selected historical and cultural data about Earth. "These contain the truth about humanity," Shaw continued, "not the propaganda your leaders have spread. Review it before your rescue arrives. It may help you understand what happens next." As the communication ended, Lieutenant Commander Chen approached the captain's position. "Transmission of cultural package complete. The seeds are planted." Shaw nodded, watching the disabled conclave ships on the view screen. "Prepare for jump to coordinates Epsilon 9. It's time for Phase 2. The Thunderchild disappeared into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind confused conclave crews who would soon begin accessing the information packages, the first exposure many of them would have to unfiltered human history, art, philosophy, and the documentary evidence of conclave deception. The real battle wasn't for territory. It was for truth. High Chancellor Xervox's private chamber fell into stunned silence as the holographic display flickered off. The transmission from Lieutenant Commander Chen had been traced to its source, somehow originating from within the Conclave's most secure communication hub on Proxima Station. The implications were staggering. Humans had infiltrated the very heart of Conclave's security infrastructure. "Impossible," whispered General Vash, his armored exoskeleton clicking nervously. "The quantum encryption protocols are compromised," interrupted Science Director Mevlon, her translucent appendages pulsing with agitation. "As is everything else we thought secure." She manipulated a series of controls on her personal terminal, bringing up a classified analysis that caused several council members to emit involuntary distress pheromones. 17 critical systems reporting anomalous activity patterns, she continued. Subtle enough to evade standard detection protocols, but when analyzed collectively, she didn't need to finish. The data spoke for itself. Xervox rose from his ceremonial perch, all 4 eye stalks focused on the strategic display showing the Thunderchild's last known position. "How many human vessels have we actually confirmed?" "Just the one, Chancellor," replied Fleet Admiral Jorgzan. "But given these revelations, there could be dozens," finished Vash grimly, "operating under stealth protocols we can't detect." The junior analyst who had discovered the communication satellites cleared her throat nervously. All eyes turned to her, and she visibly struggled not to collapse under the collective gaze of the Conclave's leadership. "Speak, Analyst Peltora," Xervox commanded. "Chancellor, I've been analyzing subspace distortion patterns across the quarantine zone for the past 3 cycles," she began, her voice steadying as she focused on the data. "Initially, I attributed the anomalies to background radiation from the sickness pulsar. However, in light of recent events," she activated her own display, showing a complex temporal map of subtle gravitational waves emanating from Earth's solar system. "These aren't natural phenomena. They're the quantum wake signatures of vessels using advanced phase shift technology to bypass our detection grid." "How many?" demanded Vash. Peltora's inner eyelids fluttered nervously. "Conservative estimate. At least 37 distinct signatures over the past 5 years." The chamber erupted into chaos. 37 possible human warships, each potentially as advanced as the Thunderchild, secretly traversing conclave space while appearing quarantined. The strategic implications were catastrophic. Xervox silenced the uproar with a commanding gesture. "What do our intelligence assets on Earth report?" Intelligence Director Sekmore's tendrils contorted in embarrassment. "Chancellor, we have no functional assets remaining on Earth. Our last deep cover operative ceased transmission 18 cycles ago. And you didn't think to report this critical failure." Xervox's voice was dangerously quiet. "I did report it," Sekmore countered, bringing up archived communications. 3 times. Each time, the response from your office was to maintain current quarantine protocols, and that alternate intelligence sources confirmed human compliance. Xervox stared at the communication logs, his confusion evident. "I never received these reports, nor did I issue those responses." A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the implications settled. Someone had been intercepting and falsifying internal conclave communications, potentially for years. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's secure alert system activated. Admiral Jorgzan accessed the incoming transmission, his exoskeleton paling to a sickly hue as he processed the information. "The Thunderchild has appeared in the Epsilon sector," he announced, voice wavering. It's directly outside this facility." The strategic display activated automatically, showing the massive human vessel hanging in space, less than 10 kilometers from the Conclave's most secure governmental installation. It had appeared without triggering a single proximity alarm. "They're broadcasting again," Jorgzan continued. "System-wide. Lieutenant Commander Chen's face appeared on all displays throughout the facility. Her expression was neither triumphant nor threatening, simply resolved. "Conclave leadership," she began calmly. "Captain Shaw extends an invitation to Chancellor Xervox for direct negotiations aboard the Thunderchild. We have much to discuss about the future relationship between our civilizations and about the real reason Earth was quarantined." The grand broadcast chamber aboard the Thunderchild had been specifically designed for this moment. Captain Shaw stood before the curved viewport that framed the stars behind him like a cosmic stage backdrop. Advanced holographic emitters projected real-time translations of his speech in 17 different conclave languages and dialects, reaching billions across multiple star systems. For 20 years, the peoples of the conclave territories have been told that Earth was quarantined to protect galactic stability. Shaw continued, his voice measured and calm. Today, that narrative ends. Lieutenant Commander Chen monitored the quantum encryption feeds from her position off-camera. The broadcast was impossible to block. Even attempting to do so would only confirm the conclave leadership's guilt in the eyes of their citizens. Transmission has reached 97% of populated conclave worlds, she reported quietly into her communication implant. Their sensors are scrambling, but our distributed network is adapting faster than they can respond. Shaw nodded almost imperceptibly as he continued. The documents we are making freely available to all citizens show the truth. Earth was not quarantined because we were dangerous. We were isolated because we questioned. Behind him, the viewport display shifted to show historical footage from first contact, the initial human delegation asking pointed questions about resource distribution inequalities within conclave territories. The timestamp clearly showed this meeting occurred 3 years before the alleged weapons violations that had justified the quarantine. While Shaw held the attention of billions, Lieutenant Chen executed the operation's covered objective. Her neural implant connected directly to the station's quantum communication array, uploading the specialized code package developed by Earth's brightest minds during the long isolation. "Package Sierra is deploying," she subvocalized to the tactical team. 58%, 73%. The code was elegant in its subtlety. Rather than disabling conclave systems outright, it introduced what human engineers called entropy poisoning. Microscopic inefficiencies and occasional glitches designed to compound exponentially over time. Systems would appear to function normally while gradually becoming less reliable. In the main chamber, Xervox watched with growing dread as Captain Shaw methodically dismantled 20 years of conclave propaganda. The human spoke not with rage or vengeance, but with the calm certainty of someone who had already won. "We have one question for the conclave leadership," Shaw said, his gaze seeming to meet that of every watching citizen. "Why was it so important to keep humanity isolated from the galactic community? What were you afraid we would discover?" Chen's neural display flashed green. Package deployment complete. All systems nominal. On the broadcast, Shaw continued without missing a beat. "Earth extends an invitation to all species under conclave protection. We seek allies, not subjects. Partners, not dependents. The quarantine is over, not just for humanity, but for every species that wishes to determine its own destiny." Throughout conclave space, the impact was immediate and profound. On 17 worlds, long-suppressed protests erupted spontaneously. Digital networks flooded with citizens sharing and discussing the human revelations. The Thunderchild's broadcast had shattered a carefully maintained illusion of benevolent oversight. In the debris field of the destroyed monitoring station Gamma 9, 3 other human vessels deactivated their stealth systems momentarily, just long enough to receive Chen's confirmation signal. The HSS Leonidas, HS Thermopylae, and HS Salamis had been shadowing the Thunderchild's progress, ready to intervene if necessary. Now they shifted to Phase 2 of the operation, making contact with the resistance movements that had been quietly cultivating for over a decade. Commander Ishikawa of the Leonidas reviewed the mission parameters one final time before addressing her crew. "The Thunderchild has drawn their attention. Now we show them that humanity never fights alone. As her ship vanished back into stealth mode, heading toward the Regelian frontier where the most organized resistance cell awaited contact, the Conclave's carefully constructed power structure had already begun to fracture from within. Captain Shaw concluded his address with words that would echo across the galaxy for generations. The battlefield quakes not from the approach of our warships, but from the march of truth that can no longer be contained. Sir Vox entered the diplomatic chamber aboard the Thunderchild with as much dignity as he could muster. The human vessel's interior defied all Conclave intelligence reports, not the utilitarian military design they had expected, but an elegant blend of functionality and aesthetic consideration that spoke of a civilization that valued both efficiency and beauty. Chancellor, Captain Shaw greeted him, offering the traditional conclave gesture of non-hostile intent, a human adaptation that caught Sir Vox off guard. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Your invitation was broadcast to 17 star systems, Captain, Sir Vox replied, his translator converting his clicking speech to smooth English. Declining would have been politically challenging. Shaw's smile was measured, neither gloating nor apologetic. Transparency has that effect. Lieutenant Commander Chen entered, carrying a data tablet. Her eyes met Sir Vox's without flinching, unusual for a species that had supposedly been humbled by conclave might. The hegemony of 10 has formally requested recognition as a sovereign collective, she announced, sliding the tablet across the conference table, as have the Regelian Assembly and the Ta City Confederation. Sir Vox's inner eyelids fluttered rapidly, the conclave equivalent of stunned disbelief. Those are protectorate territories. They lack the technological infrastructure for independent governance. According to your reports, perhaps, Chen countered. But we've found their development quite impressive during our covert contact over the past decade. The revelation hung in the air between them. Humanity hadn't just been planning their own return. They had been systematically building alliances throughout conclave space. Before Sir Vox could respond, the ship's communication system activated. A holographic display showed massive protests erupting across 3 core conclave worlds. Citizens of a dozen species filled the streets, many carrying symbols matching the Thunderchild's insignia. Your actions border on aggression, Captain, Sir Vox said, struggling to maintain composure. Inciting rebellion. We simply provided truth, Shaw interrupted. Your citizens decided what to do with it. A junior officer entered the chamber, approaching Chen with urgent news. After a brief exchange, she turned to Shaw. Sir, we're receiving distress signals from multiple conclave military vessels. Their navigation systems are experiencing unexpected failures. Sir Vox's compound eyes narrowed. What have you done? Nothing directly harmful, Shaw assured him. The code package Lieutenant Commander Chen deployed during our broadcast simply accelerates entropy in systems built on deception. The more your records have been falsified, the more quickly the systems deteriorate. Chen's expression remained neutral, but satisfaction flickered in her eyes. We call it truth decay. Poetic, in a way. For the first time, true fear crept into Sir Vox's posture. The Conclave's power had always depended on controlled information and technological superiority. Both were now compromised. What do you want? He asked finally. Shaw activated a holographic display showing a comprehensive peace treaty already drafted and translated into all major conclave languages. Recognition of Earth as a sovereign entity. Diplomatic relations with all conclave worlds and protectorates. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission regarding the quarantine decision. Shaw's voice remained level, reasonable, and full disclosure about what lies beyond the Perseus Veil. Sir Vox recoiled visibly at the last demand. How could you possibly know about? We have spent 20 years studying every transmission, every navigational restriction, every astronomical anomaly in conclave space, Chen interjected. We know there's something out there that frightens even you, Chancellor. The ship's AI announced an incoming transmission from Conclave High Command. 3 council members appeared in holographic form, their body language conveying clear distress. Chancellor, the Seventh Fleet is reporting critical systems failures. The hegemony worlds are declaring independence. We need to implement emergency protocols immediately. Kirvox looked from the council members to Captain Shaw, understanding dawning in his alien features. The Thunderchild had never needed to fire a single weapon. The humans had waged war on the battlefield of information and truth, and the Conclave had already lost. Perhaps, he said finally, we should discuss this treaty in detail, Captain. Shaw nodded, satisfaction evident in his calm demeanor. I thought you might see reason, Chancellor. Shall we begin with the truth about what's beyond the veil? The holographic display aboard the Thunderchild showed the massive objects accelerating from beyond the Perseus Veil. Their movements defied conventional physics, leaving quantum distortion wakes that rippled through subspace. We first detected them 5 years ago, Servox explained, his earlier diplomatic resistance replaced by grim resignation. At first, we thought they were natural phenomena. Rogue planetoids, perhaps. When we sent research vessels to investigate, none returned. Captain Shaw studied the readings with a practiced eye. And this is why Earth was quarantined, to keep us from detecting these entities. Servox's translator struggled to convey the complex emotions in his response. Partially, your species' rapid technological advancement was already concerning to the Conclave. When our long-range sensors detected these visitors approaching from the galactic rim, the decision was made to isolate potential threats. Earth was merely the most promising of those threats. Lieutenant Commander Chen's expression hardened. So you sacrificed our world to protect yourselves. To protect all worlds, Servox corrected. The Conclave has been preparing defensive measures for nearly 2 decades. The quarantine protocols, Earth's included, were part of that preparation. Before Chen could respond, the ship's AI announced an incoming transmission from the HSS Leonidas. Commander Ishikawa's face appeared on the main view screen, her normally composed features marked with urgency. Captain Shaw, we've made contact with the hegemony of 10. Their deep space monitoring stations have recorded additional objects emerging from the veil, at least 30 more than previous scans detected. Current trajectory puts them on an intercept course with the Rigelian frontier in approximately 72 hours. Shaw's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed the rapid calculations happening behind them. Thank you, Commander. Continue coordination with the hegemony leadership. We'll integrate their sensor data with ours. As the transmission ended, Shaw turned back to Servox. It seems your visitors have accelerated their timetable, Chancellor, perhaps in response to our activities. Or perhaps they were always coming, and your arrival merely coincided with their advance. Servox countered. The question now is what we do about it. The diplomatic chamber fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. Humanity had returned to galactic society expecting to confront their oppressors, only to discover a greater threat looming on the horizon. Chen accessed her neural interface, pulling up classified Earth defense protocols. The Neptune array could be recalibrated to serve as an early warning system, and the Jupiter defensive platforms would be insufficient against entities of this magnitude. Shaw finished, studying the holographic projections. We need something more. An alert chimed as new data arrived from Earth Command. Shaw reviewed it with widening eyes before addressing both his officers and the Conclave representatives. It appears our scientists have been studying the same phenomena, albeit from a greater distance. They've identified a pattern in the quantum signatures these entities emit. He transferred the data to the main display. They're not simply approaching, they're communicating, and the patterns match ancient signals detected in Earth's deep space archives. Servox's compound eyes focused intently on the data. They've been here before. Not just here, Chen realized, making connections between the Earth archives and the Conclave data. If these timestamps are accurate, they'd visited multiple galaxies over millions of years. They're not invaders. They are returning to territory they consider their own. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the diplomatic chamber. The galaxy wasn't being invaded. It was being reclaimed by entities that considered the current civilizations as temporary occupants at best, irrelevant interlopers at worst. Shaw straightened his uniform, decision made. Chancellor, I propose an immediate alliance between Earth, the Conclave, and all independent systems willing to join. Not a hierarchy like your Conclave, nor a loose affiliation, a true partnership of equals against a common threat. And the quarantine, the resource appropriation, the deceptions, Chen asked pointedly. To be addressed through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Shaw replied firmly. But after we ensure there's a galaxy left in which to pursue justice. Shervox's translator took a moment to process his response. For the first time in Conclave history, we find ourselves without choice. We accept your proposal, Captain Shaw. As if in response to this fateful agreement, the long-range sensors detected a new surge of activity beyond the veil. The visitors had increased their speed. The Thunderchild held position at the edge of the heliopause, serving as the command vessel for the hastily assembled defensive fleet. Through the main viewport, Lieutenant Commander Chen observed ships of 17 different species formed in precise tactical arrangements, patterns developed by a joint strategic command that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. Final transmissions from the evacuation corridors confirm all civilian transports have reached safety, she reported to Captain Shaw, who stood at the center of the bridge surrounded by holographic tactical displays. The hegemony worlds are providing temporary sanctuary. Shaw nodded, his attention focused on the swirling anomaly forming at the edge of sensor range. The Void Leviathans, as the entities had been designated in a rare moment of poetic consensus among the scientific community, were emerging from subspace. All vessels report ready, Captain, announced Lieutenant Rodriguez from Tactical. Weapon systems aligned according to the harmonic resonance patterns. The defensive strategy had been developed in an unprecedented collaboration between human theoretical physicists and conclave quantum specialists. If their calculations were correct, the Void Leviathan's unique subspace signatures could be disrupted by precisely calibrated energy waves emitted simultaneously from multiple vessels. Sirvox entered the bridge, accompanied by representatives from the newly formed Alliance of Free Worlds. The Conclave Chancellor had shed his ceremonial carapace for battle armor, a symbolic gesture not lost on anyone present. The Perseus defense grid is fully operational, he reported, though we cannot be certain it will have any effect against entities of this nature. Shaw acknowledged the report with a grim nod. Certainty is a luxury none of us can afford today, Chancellor. The bridge fell silent as the first of the Void Leviathans fully materialized in normal space. The entity defied conventional description, neither ship nor creature but something between, its form constantly shifting between states of matter while maintaining a vaguely triangular structure larger than most moons. By the progenitors, whispered a Regellian representative, tentacles curling in awe and terror. The entity emitted a pulse of energy that washed over the defensive fleet. Ship systems flickered momentarily before the advanced shielding developed by the Alliance engineers stabilized. They're scanning us, Chen realized, studying the energy pattern. Or perhaps, tasting us. All vessels, maintain formation. Shaw ordered through the fleet-wide channel. Prepare to execute protocol harmony on my mark. Throughout the assembled fleet, crews of diverse species steeled themselves for the confrontation. The weeks of frantic preparation had forged unexpected bonds across former enemy lines. Engineers who once developed weapons to use against each other had worked without sleep to integrate disparate technologies into a cohesive defense system. As the Void Leviathan advanced toward the fleet, two more emerged from subspace behind it. Their synchronized movements suggested a hive mind, or at least a form of communication beyond the Alliance's understanding. They're accelerating, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, tension evident in her voice. Shaw studied the tactical display for one final moment, then stood straighter. All vessels, execute protocol harmony. Throughout the fleet, specialized emitters activated simultaneously, generating overlapping fields of quantum resonance precisely calibrated to the Void Leviathan's unique signatures. The space between the fleet and the entities rippled visibly as the intersecting energy patterns created disruption zones in subspace itself. The lead Leviathan shuddered, its form becoming momentarily unstable before it emitted a counterwave of devastating power. 3 Alliance vessels on the perimeter lost shields instantly, their hulls breaching in explosive decompressions. "Adjust harmonic frequency by 0.3 terahertz," Shaw ordered, his voice steady despite the losses. "All vessels compensate and reinforce." Chen watched the tactical display with growing alarm as the Leviathans adapted to the initial disruption. "They're learning our patterns faster than projected, Captain." As the battle intensified, Communications Officer Lieutenant Park turned from her station. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Leviathans." The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this unexpected development. Shaw shared a meaningful glance with Exervox before giving the order. "Let's hear what they have to say."